The average time between being hacked and realizing you've been hacked is 1 year. Can you afford to let an intruder roam your network for that long? Can your company weather the fallout when this comes to light? Black Hills Information Security can find the bad guys in your network and train you to do it yourself. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com to find out how a hunt teaming engagement can help you find a persistent threat in your network. Signal Sciences is the industry's first web protection platform that works in any cloud, any container, any platform as a service, and any modern application architecture. The Signal Sciences web protection platform can be deployed in next-generation WAF, RASP, or reverse proxy modes, giving customers ultimate flexibility and coverage. Protect your web applications with Signal Sciences web protection platform. Signal Sciences, protecting applications, connecting teams. For more information, check them out at signalsciences.com/PSW. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. Quick announcement, securityweekly.com/on-demand. Check out our on-demand webcast, all kinds of fun content there that you can register for. John and I did a webcast on pen testing. It's there. 3, 4, what? Oh, anyway, check it out, securityweekly.com/on-demand. And now, the security news for this week. Woo! I'm here with the same cast of characters. My question for the panel is, did anyone see this MikroTik router OS vulnerability and associated exploit?
No, but...
damn it, I was hoping someone else did.
But that's kind of interesting because now I may need to update a MikroTik router that I'm going to use next week at Sans Austin.
You were the second person that I told them that there was a vulnerability in MikroTik routers, that they were like, oh crap, gotta go. Got some updating to do.
Yep.
It looks like there is a fix for it. What I find interesting is there's an exploit in ExploitDB, and it's called the Chime Red Stack Clash Remote Code Execution exploit.
Chime
Apparently,
Red?
And named after the beer, Chime Red, which is a Belgian beer, if I'm not mistaken. Trappist ale. Anyway, I don't know how that's relevant to the exploit, but
maybe it's
useless knowledge from here at Security Weekly. It is a Belgian Trappist ale.
Somebody's favorite beer.
Someone's favorite beer. Maybe the person who found the vulnerability.
Or what they were drinking when they found it.
Yep, could
And,
be. Like what popular virus that came out in 2001? Named after a popular beverage. I think it was 2001. So my trivia questions. You don't remember?
Oh.
Malware? A worm that was a worm?
Was it Code Red?
It was Code Red, yes. Thanks to whoever had that.
Mountain Dew Code Red?
Mountain Dew Code Red.
Gross.
Do you know one of the people that's discovered that vulnerability? They were on the show.
Who hasn't been on the show, Paul?
Eugene Kaspersky, Near from Palo Alto. They're on my hit list to be on the show, not for any other purpose than to make an appearance on one of our shows.
I sent. Speaking of,
it was Mark Mayfrey was one of the discoverers.
Yes. I sent you a link in Slack.
Oh, now everyone has to forget that, or I have to write new questions now. I should know better not to ask the questions that I ask, because now everyone knows. Well, there you go. There's one question. So if you listen to the show, you'll do one question better.
Make sure you use your OSINT and listen to the show, and you get the answers.
Or read the transcripts.
There are no.
Such as Security Now, episode 224.
Hey, is it 224, Larry? Is that?
I sent you a link in Slack if you have Slack.
Funny piece of history.
Yeah.
Apparently.
That would
anyway.
be Slack as opposed to
Slack. I'm there. I'm with you. I was getting there.
Gotcha.
Yep.
So,
what else is going on? I don't have any more information about the MikroTik.
Remote code execution, though. Did they say the method of remote code execution?
It was called I do have another story on it.
Okay.
Which doesn't, I read it, but unfortunately doesn't tell you much other than there's malware out there affecting, nicknamed Slingshot, affects routers and computers connected to two phases, runs hostile kernel code, and this really, like ads, go away. The second stores malware files in an encrypted virtual file system. It can even shut down the components itself. It was found by Kaspersky. It's likely, they say, government agency behind it, given the sophistication. The worst part is the malware has been infecting MikroTik routers and possibly other brands since 2012.
Interesting.
I thought that was very interesting. Again, I wish I had a lot more technical details. I was at a conference. I have not read the exploit code other than a couple of the comments at the top. Which say it's Chime Red, and it was tested on router OS 6.38.4. on a MIPS-based processor. I'll spare you the details of the MIPS processor because there's lots of different types. Yeah, so interesting.
Ooh, I'm taking a Python class. This makes sense to me now.
Yes, and it's written in Python, yes, Larry. So yes, this might be a good exercise for you before you update your MikroTik router to see if you can get this exploit working.
What is not written in Python today?
Yes. A lot of uncommented out lines over here, too, from the shellcode.
Ooh, struct.
Yeah, it actually looks like pretty interesting code to read. So that link is in the show notes.
I learned about struct pack today, so that's
nice.
It's a good thing.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Did you see this article, which unfortunately I can't bring up in any good format, from Robert Graham at Erotisec wrote an article about, I guess John Oliver covered Bitcoin in a show.
He did.
And so did you watch that one? What did you think of that? I don't know if you follow. I don't follow Bitcoin as closely as maybe I should, but.
Yeah, I'm probably one of those people who just kind of see Bitcoin and like my eyes glaze over a little bit. And it's one of those things like about all I know about Bitcoin is to stay out of it because it doesn't seem like probably a good investment at this point. And I also remember watching the show this past Sunday night because around here I think it's on Sunday nights at 11 or something like that. And as soon as he started going into Bitcoin, he admitted, he was like, you know, this is going to be extremely high level for anybody that knows anything about this.
Sure.
You know, if you know about Bitcoin, you're technical, then we're not going into any kind of depth. And I also remember, like, I love John Oliver. He's one of my favorite shows to watch. And last year, he had some kind of show where he was talking about, like, nuclear waste. And somebody days later did, like, this takedown on, like, so many reasons that John Oliver was wrong. And one of the things, like, John Oliver is talking about, like, you know, we have all these tons of nuclear waste. And then it's like, hundreds of tons and thousands of tons that are all over the place and we're disposing it. And then somebody was talking about like, well, do you understand how heavy nuclear waste is? Just because it's tons, it doesn't mean that that takes up a whole lot of space.
No, that's true.
So that kind of made me think, it's like, okay, well, that makes perfect sense. And if John Oliver was wrong about that and I read this takedown, how many other times is John Oliver wrong about things when he kind of starts going? So now I try to watch him with a little bit more of a critical eye when he's like, A leads to B, B leads to C, C leads to D, and
now
it's
we're
like
fact-checking John Oliver.
But now my question really is, how heavy is nuclear waste, and is it really they make that much of a difference?
Let's go to Jeff, who works for the nuclear. Wait, can we say where you work, Jeff? Was that on air that you said that before?
Don't say that.
Larry, would you believe that?
I am currently detailed with the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission.
You had me bored there for a second.
I don't honestly know how much a ton of nuclear waste weighs, but I'll
we need to get
an
expert.
I know that.
I do know how much a ton of nuclear waste weighs.
Exactly the same as a ton of feathers.
Exactly. It weighs exactly 1 ton.
But it does not weigh the same as a ton of gold.
What?
Yes, it does.
What
is
is
exactly the same as a ton of gold. It
Because
just
gold
requires
is
a different
measured
volume.
by troy weight scales, and everything else is measured avoirdupois.
What is the specific gravity of the nuclear waste is really what I want to know.
I think he just referenced Troy, who was on Mr. Robot.
He did.
Anyway.
But
Jeff, you need to get an
I
expert
have another point in there somewhere
from your work to come on and talk about how much a ton of nuclear waste actually weighs.
Yeah. So yeah.
What I was going to say was in my Jedi Mind Trick course, I talk about when you're trying to explain complex things to people that don't understand or don't know. I say, you know, it's okay. You absolutely need to simplify the conversation. And I will say, and I'll let you guys weigh in on your opinions, but I think it's okay in your attempts to oversimplify things to make slight little errors and, you know, not be technically accurate if you're kind of getting the point across, because the people that don't understand or know anyway, it doesn't matter as long as you're getting the point across. So I don't necessarily would knock John Oliver for taking on something as complex as Bitcoin and a blockchain drink.
He does. We're drinking on blockchain now. That's awesome. So he does say that some of the things that John Oliver said were correct. Some of them he specifically calls out as being incorrect, such as that currencies have value because people agree that they have value. Like how they agree that a Beanie Baby is worth $15,000.
And then
look at our whole monetary system is based on value that we assign essentially to stuff that we dig up out of the ground.
Not really even anymore.
Not anymore, but that, I mean, that's the history of it, though.
Right.
But what Robert was saying is that I thought this was fast, not really security related, to be honest with you, but that I never thought of it this way, that money is a good, right? It's not just this intangible thing. It is a good. When I give someone money in exchange for gasoline, like it's actually a good trade of goods, more so than it is like money as like this abstract thing.
And that good is representing something that you can
of value,
that you can use to obtain other goods with.
And we could use gasoline.
You might need to define what a good is to the millennials that are listening.
True, but
it's the opposite of bad.
You could use gasoline as your good, right? And exchange that for other things, but it's not as easily stored or transported as money is, and that's why we use one reason why we use
and that was
money.
what Jeff was saying, is that we used to represent money with things that we dig out of the ground, because the things that we dig out of the ground are difficult to obtain and hard to transport. Whereas this piece of paper says that this is worth so much of that thing that we dug out of the ground.
I mean, we literally, in terms of our money, the reason why a quarter of a dollar, a quarter is called a quarter, is because people used to mint coins that they deemed worth a dollar, whether it was gold or silver, and they would actually cut it into pieces in order to make change. So a quarter of a dollar would be this pie-shaped segment of what used to be like a gold doubloon or something like that.
Yep, pieces of eight. Pieces of eight.
Anyway,
and now we're doing this all electronically in the ether, and people are up in arms about it. But I don't think in some way it's any sillier than the way that we've built our monetary system historically. Right.
Another thing that I think is interesting about this article, where they're claiming that John Oliver was patently wrong about a lot of things and that it was not useful. I think for the masses, it was really useful for them to help understand this type of stuff, because if you think about the average audience that the news and the paper is trying to reach, is someone with a 6th grade education level. So, explaining blockchain to a 6th grader.
I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but the ones that listen to John Oliver are probably slightly more educated.
I would agree.
Just saying.
I would agree, but that is the typical stance.
There's not many 6th graders up at 11 p.m.
No.
That's true.
What's up next, Paul?
Next.
There was another point in that article, but not really. It's more security related about.
Well,
the way he described.
To summarize, I don't think we need to knock John Oliver for trying to take something complex and make it understandable to the layman.
He does talk about turning chicken into a McNugget, and how you can't reverse the process, which is, of course, more like a one-way hash algorithm, and not so much the way that Bitcoin works. That part was more security related. In things that we talk about. So
you can't take a McNugget and turn it into a chicken.
Correct.
I mean, you could, but it'd be a really shitty chicken.
It would be not a really great chicken. Yes. I have not read about the new AMD vulnerability because I was at a conference.
Which one?
I don't know. All I read was that Linus Torvalds was up in arms about this, and he said the last security advice is basically, if you replace the BIOS or CPU microcode of an evil version, you might have a security problem. So that was his, of course, take on many security vulnerabilities that they're not really security vulnerabilities. It's a feature. It's a feature, or not important. So
and speaking of something similar too, I caught this brief flash that I meant to go back and look at and didn't get a chance to. Was some announced vulnerabilities in AMI's Secure Boot stuff that, of course, we had on the show last week.
Yes.
So was kind of interesting timing for that. I literally saw it flash by. I meant to go back and read it, and then got sucked into Python for the remainder of the week. So, but I also did hear that there were more than one of the AMD vulnerabilities reported, because now apparently that's a thing.
Yeah, unfortunately.
So is it, and I know you don't really maybe know the answer to this, is it like we were talking about with the chip vulnerabilities a month or so ago? Is it sort of like a new class of vulnerability that's emerging?
I would say yes.
Okay.
I mean, I think the issues have been there before. When we think about, what was it, the math bug with the 486, I think it's something that's been there, But
the Pentium 90.
Oh, Pentium 90. Sorry.
Wow, we're going way back in history.
That was my first PC. Home PC.
Yep, and then the operating system had to do a patch to fix bad math. But so I think very similar types of things, but not really necessarily taken seriously. At the time, it was just, oh well, they did bad math. Now it's a little bit more serious.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I had more time to read about this vulnerability. I apologize to our listeners. All I get is the Linus Torvalds thing when I start searching for it.
Yeah.
And they all use that same picture of
him
Linus
giving
Torvalds giving the middle finger.
Yep.
It's ridiculous.
But what was one of the other ones that I thought was there? And Paul, I saw you looking at was the Memcrashed Memcached exploit tool.
Yeah, it's an actual exploit tool for that vulnerability.
And,
which I thought was pretty
I was like,
is it in Python, Larry?
I don't know.
Oh, I think it is in
But
Python.
we did have this in the it is apt-get install Python 3, Scapian Showdown. But yeah, we had this in the show notes last week, and I don't think we ever really got a chance to talk about it. So, yeah, some tools for dealing with Memcached D to be able to do distributed denial service attacks.
Yes.
Yep. Good stuff.
Pre-installed malware found on 5 million popular Android phones. I mean, this is a story we just covered so much.
Shocking.
Shocking. It's like not even really news, as well as Flash vulnerabilities.
Aren't they called apps?
Pretty much, Jeff. That's,
yes.
You know what? That's the only analysis you need of that story. That's perfectly summed up.
Jeff, the only difference is that these were pre-installed, so they probably were apps. Oh no, these are the apps installed by the carriers.
Yes.
So pre-installed by the carrier, right?
Gotcha.
Nothing really to write home about on the new Flash and Windows vulnerabilities.
Yeah, I know it's not in the show notes, and I think you talked about it on one of your other shows earlier. But did you actually see a video of Alexa laughing?
Yes,
I did. We covered that.
Isn't
story.
that kind of freaking creepy?
I forget it when I dug into it with Keith Hoodlid on Application Security Weekly. It was just like a programming flaw that would make her laugh prematurely. So if she heard the word laugh, something like that, there was no check, she would just start laughing, and then they fixed the code. It was really not as interesting as creepy if it happens. And
but
I tell the story of when the electrician was here working and the power came back on and the Echo device came back on and said hello. He thought a woman was standing in the room with them, and he was really freaked out and he thought it was haunted. So that's pretty funny.
The sad part is because my wife heard about this thing, so she says, Alexa,
oh no,
laugh. Waiting to hear it from the other room. And it wasn't the same laugh at all. Not even close. Not that creepy type. And she did it multiple times and got the same one every time.
It was a creepy laugh.
Oh, yeah.
It was. I remember reading it now.
Yeah, I mean, if you saw a video of it, it's a really creepy laugh, and I think we're closer to Skynet than we think.
But I will say I fell victim to some of the things that we do to you here in the studio, Paul. In that was
add
taking
stuff to my shopping cart.
Well, I was taking
like a 55-gallon drum of lube is always in my shopping cart.
Yep. Alexa.
No. Stop.
Never mind. Alexa?
No, stop.
Are you turned on?
But now everyone listening now that has one of these devices is cursing you right now.
Well, that happened to me because I was taking 573 via on demand on my speakers in my office, and my device,
Echo device,
my Echo turns on because he's talking about the keyword that is the service that aggregates the top 1,000 websites.
Oh,
that one.
Yeah, it's an oversubscribed term.
Yeah. And talking about that, and every 30 seconds, I don't understand. I can't understand. Never mind. Alexa?
No.
Tell me a joke.
Stop. No. God, no. Please, no. Her jokes are terrible, Larry. Terrible.
You're a dad. You should appreciate them.
They are bad dad jokes.
Alexa, tell me a pirate joke.
No. Oh, God. Our poor listeners. I'm sorry.
Pirate walks into a bar, sits down. Bartender asks him, "What's with the paper towel on your hat?" He says, "I've got a bounty on me head."
Oh,
How about the pirate that walks into a bar with
Jeff, why aren't you not stopping this madness? Come on now.
ship steering wheel as a belt
Well,
buckle?
because he's funny.
Oh, is that
You were just going.
Bartender looks at him and
"Chris,
goes, "Get a
Chris,
steering wheel for
I know that,
a
Chris."
belt buckle." Pirate says, "I'd be driving me nuts."
Oh, God. Nice. That's funny to you, Jeff. I see.
He's a dad. Just dad jokes.
Someday I'll meet this Chris character.
Gave away all my batteries today. My used batteries today. Free of
I
charge.
was gonna say.
God.
I'm sure we interviewed.
Oh,
Chris.
God. No, make it stop. Go to a new story. VMware has released security updates. That's got to be more interesting. Pirate jokes. Or not.
He wants some ninja jokes.
Just say I would have segued to the next one, given that we were talking about really bad jokes coming from an Echo.
Oh, yeah. I was trying to pull that up.
But
Why
yeah,
is Siri so dumb?
I was trying to pull that up too, but apparently your ad blocking stuff doesn't allow us to do that.
Awesome. And the other website actually showed me. Oh, no, it's loading now.
Yeah, no.
Oh, no, and then it doesn't. But that's not my ad. Oh, wait.
Ad block?
With your
I was
network.
able to look at the article, but it was very laden with adware.
Oh, so I have to disable my ad blocker. I don't know if I'm willing to do that.
Well, it's
Sorry.
it's the network.
I think I can remember.
It's the network-based ad blocker.
Yeah, I don't know. No, that looks like it's coming from them. In any case, so I was just thinking. Now
Basically,
you got me ads.
Siri was stupid because Steve Jobs died.
What?
Yeah,
what I got
that's
out of it.
Jeff just summed up the story that obviously you guys didn't read. Otherwise, you'd come to the same conclusion that Jeff did: is that Siri is stupid because Steve Jobs died. It's really there's nothing more to report there. Actually,
So Steve Jobs was answering all the damn queries? What? The hell?
No. They
Talk about a
stopped-
bus factor of 1 on Siri. God damn.
Basically, they stopped updating the code.
Oh.
And all the other services that do that obviously spend a lot of time constantly learning and training their algorithms.
Mm-hmm.
And Apple was not until more recently, which is why they came out with the HomePod. Is it called HomePod? To compete with Amazon and Google.
Wait, what? Google's HomePod, wasn't it?
No, Apple has a new home thing.
Oh, yeah.
Is that HomePod?
HomeKit.
HomeKit. Or is it a home?
HomeKit, but HomeKit is driven by Siri.
Correct. Yes, that's what the article said anyway. I think it's a home. Is it a HomePod?
I think it's
read the
HomePod.
article. I'd read the
Yeah, it's a
article,
HomePod. It's an Apple HomePod. Google's device is something different.
Yeah.
It's a whatever Google's device.
Either way, I'm in bed.
Next.
Alexa.
Google Home is the Google Home.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Next story.
We did promise them what happens when Bitcoin miners take over your town. Because
let's do that.
911 is a joke in your town.
that's right.
Bitcoin miners take over your town.
Apparently, there is a town where power is really cheap.
I'd venture to guess it's in Iceland.
No, it's in eastern Washington State.
Mm.
Yes.
But nobody lives in Eastern Washington State.
Apparently, some people do. I think is what the article was saying.
East Wenatchee.
Or because they were buying up property there.
Yep.
Because the price of electricity was so much cheaper because they're near some kind of power source. Some kind of water power source, I think. And so you need a location now today with Bitcoin. And people bought into this property early, and people have been buying it up since Bitcoin is becoming more popular because, again, the gist I got from the article was about half the price of what you'd normally pay. And considering that a quarter of a megawatt or even a half a megawatt is enough to light up a couple hundred homes, which is what you would need to start successfully mining Bitcoin today.
And it looks like lots of temporary built structures from the picture at the top of the article, including shipping containers with big fans for cooling. Used shipping containers, I might add. That's pretty damn cool.
That's pretty cool, right?
East Wenatchee.
And they tried to pick sites that would have, good, easy cooling, like an old car. So they're going and buying up places that have been kind of abandoned, like an old car wash and stuff, thinking that to run all those heaters and stuff, they already have a pretty good power source that they can build upon to mine Bitcoin. And so basically there's these whole towns in like the middle of nowhere in Washington State, which made it sound like is now being filled up with all the sounds of servers and spinning fans. essentially,
Yep.
which I thought was pretty cool.
That's interesting.
Not in Iceland, right here in the U.S.
That's crazy.
Microsoft starts borrowing speculative execution exploits.
Yeah,
I always think it's interesting when large companies go out and buy exploits.
But
Keith
speculative execution in this one.
It's like
But speculative execution.
like Spectre and Meltdown is how
Yep.
I read it, right?
And they're paying quite handsomely.
It's interesting.
$250,000.
I'm not sure why they would do that. I mean, they understand the bug well enough to try and fix it anyway. Maybe it's to get a better understanding of how to fix it.
Maybe.
Is they're trying to buy the exploit? Does buying the exploit? It's a really good question. Does buying the exploit prevent it from getting into the hands of other people?
Mm-hmm.
In that case, why is Microsoft buying it and not the government? Or the conspiracy theorist is the government is funding Microsoft to buy it and do the.
I was going to say maybe they're
research.
buying it from the government,
or they're buying it from a government, this government, or another government.
Yeah, well, and
speculation.
And, we could have somebody like Katie Masuris come on to talk about some of the financials behind something like that. But if all of a sudden this bug, this malware or the 0-day gets out there, and what does it cost Microsoft to scramble to put together a patch for something like that? Arguably, it's more than $250,000 for them to scramble to put together the team to put together a patch.
It's a good point, Larry. If you have the exploit, developing a patch can be quicker. Now, it can also be the dangerous part, which is I'm only patching for this particular exploit and not other ways that it could be exploited. But one is reasonable to assume that once you have the exploit, that it's easier to patch.
Yep.
Just like having the patch makes it easier to write the exploit.
Right. Now that said, if if they have the exploit and the exploit is under embargo, it gives them more time to address the issue at lower cost, and can have that longer for additional analysis to potentially fix the root cause of the problem, and not just be reactionary for that one particular exploit.
Assuming they haven't sold it to someone else or someone else hasn't stolen it or figured it out in the meantime.
Right, which we know that if one person's figured it out,
there's a lot of variables here. That's kind of pun intended, right? Not in every case does having the patch necessarily make it easier to write the exploit, or vice versa, having the exploit make it easier. I mean, there's a lot of variables in that process, which I realize is kind of ironic, but yes.
Yep. Pwn2Own 2018.
I think the Pwn2Own is really cool, but I see a lot of money being handed out for exploits. I mean, it kind of ties to our previous kind of thing. My question is, is this really news? They run Pwn2Own. People find exploits for things and they pay them. I have respect for all the people that run Pwn2Own, all the people finding the exploits, and all the people and vendors that are participating to help fund this and then actually fixing the exploits. So, I mean, there's great work going on. I just don't know that it's necessarily newsworthy to talk about anymore.
But Pwn2Own has been going on forever. And we've talked about it on the show for years.
A long time. It was very controversial when it first came out.
But still, amazing things continue to happen that come out of this. For example, I'm reading through the article that one gentleman, Richard Zhu, earned $70,000 from exploiting Microsoft Edge. His initial attempt failed, but he was able to rework his exploit chain, which included 2 use-after-free memory vulnerabilities in the browser in combination with an integer overflow in the Windows kernel.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
And he did it live in front of the crowd.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
But that's worth $70,000 if you ask me.
Well, and you weren't there, but he was blindfolded.
And one hand tied behind his back.
I wouldn't doubt it.
I have a question though and this is probably mostly for Larry. Actually, Patrick could weigh in too, since he's a pen tester.
I'm out.
You're out, Paul.
You're a washed-up has-been.
Who's that Chris guy?
I've been thinking about this for a couple weeks because of all these devastating new vulnerabilities that have been discovered in things like the chipsets and the AMD thing earlier. And I don't even know how to phrase the question. How often do you guys in your pen tests, and I guess more importantly, how often in the breaches that we hear about, has the attack happened because of some over-the-top dazzling, really high tech. Somebody figured out how to break something shit versus what I know we've talked about ad nauseum.
You mean
weak passwords
when we do stuff, or when we go into an environment that's already been compromised?
Well, my question is, are we sort of creating this sort of self-perpetuating industry in terms of all these sort of high-end types of vulnerabilities and exploits? And I know they get used, but are the smart people on the good side discovering them first? I guess I'm trying to figure out, how often do the bad guys go to such great lengths to figure out all this stuff, and how much is it the good guys finding it, for good purposes, to try to make sure it nothing bad happens? I don't even know if the question makes sense. I just sometimes wonder.
I think I know where you're going with that. Like, what's the ratio of good to bad for folks finding these things? Yeah. And I think that's a really fine line, in that I think there are, more often than not now, that there are a lot of good people finding these exploits, and they get disclosed publicly after some embargo period in which the manufacturers or software vendors are given the opportunity to patch and issue patches and all this stuff and notify their customers, which I think is great. But the point that I find that is the trickiest part is that now, once you've let the cat out of the bag, I mean, you can't unimpregnate the cow. The cow is pregnant. You can't put the cat back in the bag. It's done. It's over. It's out.
Why is there a cat and a cow?
It can't be done because it's really weird. That's why. But you can't undo this action once the vulnerability in the exploit is out there.
I think I can put the question this way, and how successful would the bad guys be if all the good people that are doing the research stopped doing it, and we stopped doing disclosures altogether, and stopped doing all this bug stuff, and just kind of did something else? I mean, if it all went away, how successful would the bad guys be? They don't seem to be the ones doing all the heavy lifting here. It seems like it's mostly the good guys.
I would argue by that metric they would be 100% successful, because they would be the only people doing it.
Yeah. No, I agree with Larry, for sure. I think that it's a smaller...
I think that's simplistic. I think I want a longer answer, but okay. I see where you're going.
I'll give you a longer answer, Jeff, as soon as I figure out who Chris is. But so... if we didn't do all this work around bug bounties and finding exploits, and we kind of left it to the bad guys, that would create a much larger black market for exploits. It also, to kind of address your question or observation, Jeff, that while I think a large percentage of evil, bad people today doing things in the internet, they're not the ones writing the exploits or discovering the vulnerabilities. That's a much smaller percentage, but if we left it to those, they would become more powerful, so to speak, and gain more money by selling those exploits. I think some of them are leaked and kind of ripped out of the underground because of things like bug bounties and larger organizations purchasing. And these could be the people who make the software. These could be nation states, and these could be there are companies who will actually purchase these and sell them in a legitimate marketplace. I'm not sure that quite helps getting them out of bad people's hands, but unless they're doing some kind of vetting process. So that's kind of my assessment, Jeff. Does that help? Is that more detailed answer that you were looking for?
Yes, I like that much better. So
I'm not sure why Microsoft would still go buy these exploits, given everything that we've talked about. There's like so much speculation. We almost needed an official word from Microsoft, and that is kind of another issue that we have today, that not Microsoft and Apple, I think, are some of the bigger offenders to not providing a lot of information as to what they're doing with security, or why they're doing things with security, or information about even potential vulnerabilities and or exploits in their own software.
So I do have a follow-up question. And I'm not saying it's appropriate for all the good guys to stop doing the research. I obviously think that's important. I just get a little bit speculative sometimes. But and you touched on, or Larry said, well, if only the bad guys were doing these things, they'd be 100% successful. But if our focus was not so much on vulnerability discovery and on detection of threats, bad actors, malicious activity, would that help to remediate, assuming that we weren't focusing all of our limited resources on vulnerability discovery and focusing it more on, let's say, threat discovery, would that be collectively more cost effective than the current state of affairs?
I'm sorry, Jeff, repeat the question. I was thinking something else to talk about.
You're trying to. I knew some Chris that said something like this.
No, but yeah, Jeff, that's a really good question. I'm thinking about that because I don't know that I have a really, really good answer, but I'll let you repeat the question while I'm thinking again.
I thought Paul was just daring me to repeat the question. My question is, in as much as we sometimes our industry, and we've talked about it other times, other shows, about how we kind of get sort of stuck on vulnerability discovery and doing all the vulnerability research. What if all the limited resources and all the smart people on the good side were focusing on ways to detect malicious activity, and not so much the vulnerability discovery, because if you haven't figured out yet, vulnerabilities I think are here to stay. But focus more on the detection and making sure that bad actors are being caught early when they're doing things. Would that not be a better use of our time and resources?
Well, I think inevitably you need to do both. And in order to be successful in defending architecture, you have to understand how people are attacking it. You have to understand where your potential weaknesses lie. So doing that vulnerability research and exploit research should get funneled back into defenses so that developers can understand, well, this is like some way that someone could attack this that's kind of new. I mean, we see this in web applications all the time. I'm astounded that all of the new attack vectors that happen in web application security, if we don't study the vulnerabilities and exploits, we don't adjust our processes to how we detect those vulnerabilities, how we build our defenses, how we write code in a software environment, how we write code that is more resilient.
I agree and disagree, because I think back to the early days when I first got started in this whole thing that today we call cybersecurity. We used to call it network security. And it wasn't so much about the applications and the data. It was more the transport mechanisms. And I wonder if we've sort of bought into a mentality, and it seems perfectly reasonable that we do both. But is there I keep coming back to this because we seem to be doing better, but then we wait a week or a month, and some major breach gets announced, and we find out, oh, we're not really doing that well. The collective we, and I am continuing to look for, are there other ways to approach this problem? Are there other ways to think through this thing? Are we missing something? Because we seem to keep the earlier discussion, social engineering, phishing attacks, that's been around for 20-25 years. It's not new, but it's grown as an industry in terms of teaching companies, and it's fun. I'm not denying that it's fun to do, and I don't discourage people from pursuing it. But in the midst of us having lots of fun doing these cool things, are we missing a larger point that could really be more helpful to companies? If Joff was online, he'd be saying something to me right now.
I see your point, Jeff, and I think that I agree with you, especially when it comes to the Internet of Things, right? And this is an area that I've researched extensively with vulnerabilities in embedded systems, and I did reach a point exactly what you're talking about. I reached a point where I'm like, wow, we're all doing research, or there's a lot of us doing research into how we can break into embedded systems and IoT devices. And I feel like we've reached a point a while ago where we're like, right, yeah, we can break this stuff. Okay, like enough. We don't need any more talks about how I can break into like consumer routers and Wi-Fi devices. Like we all know that there are issues. We can sit down like Daniel Messler and put them into buckets identify them, document them, and say we shouldn't do these things in these areas. OWASP has done a great job of doing that and categorizing attacks on the application side. So I think that's another great example, so that we can work towards building it into our processes, so that we create software and products and services and protocols that are resilient to these attacks that we've discovered from vulnerability research and exploit research. But to Jeff's point, like, there's a point where we don't need thousands of researchers all looking at the same problem and pointing out flaws. We need to document what they are, and some people still need to do that research, but we can probably move on to some other things, like how we do the defense. So in that sense, Jeff, I do agree.
I mean, it's kind of like, has anybody ever gotten a bug bounty for submitting the knowledge or the awareness of a default password or a default configuration? Because that's how the pen testers continually break in.
Well, I think it depends on the engagement for the bug bounty program.
It does, but also we have to define the different levels of authentication weakness, right? There's authentication bypass, there's the default credentials that may come with the device, and then there's the hard-coded credentials that are in there that aren't necessarily default. They're not. They're just kind of baked in. So you could change the default passwords, but what I would call the backdoor credentials are still valid on the system. In many embedded systems, you can't change that backdoor without upgrading the firmware and putting some new software
and I think it would also depend on the scope of the bug bounty program in place.
Yes, and in a bug bounty sense, they define the scope for bad, worse, or indifferent. They do define the scope, and that can certainly vary. Organizations, if Keith was here, like BugCrowd, could speak to probably how they coach their clients to probably a big phone call they have with every client, I would imagine, having spoken with BugCrowd. And no one officially has told me, BugCrowd, that this is how they do it. But I can imagine that when they sit down with a new client, one of the things they're helping them with is define the scope for their bug bounty. I mean, that has to be a huge part of their calls with their clients. And hopefully, organizations like BugCrowd are helping kind of raise the bar to set the appropriate level of scope for these bug bounties. And now, and to go back to your point too, all of the password issues that we talked about, if you have to pay out a bug bounty to discover those, like, we just define those for you on the show, right? Like, there needs to be not a default password, there needs to be not backdoor credentials, and there needs to be something inside of your software that helps prevent people from setting a very weak password. You already know those three things. You don't get to pay anyone a bunch of money to tell you, I gave it out here for free on the show. Like, those are things you should consider. There actually do exist standards and guidelines for many systems from OWASP and others that offer guidance and define what those things are.
But I will clarify, if you do wish to pay Paul money for that, he will gladly buy you a beer at a conference.
Absolutely.
And if you pay him lots of money, he'll buy the round of beers.
Just buy me
a
beer at a conference, or just tell me thank you. That's fine.
Or
go for the beer ball. Come on.
Or a cigar.
Or not just say thank you. That's fine.
Perfect.
Anyway.
Thank you.
So yeah, I think that's really interesting on the vulnerability research side. Certainly, a lot of interesting theories there.
Well, and I hope I'm not offending anybody. I certainly value all the really smart people out there that are figuring out all this stuff. I think it's really cool that they figure out all this stuff. But I also wonder, I don't want to, I guess it's okay to piss off the bad guys. I don't think the bad guys are that smart. And they certainly don't take as much time, and part of it's because there's just easier pickings out there. So every time that we do something to improve, hopefully we are raising the bar, and someday all the companies out there that are lagging behind, that still get breached, will catch up. But I think that's a different nut to crack. So I'm not disparaging or discouraging anybody from doing security research. I just, I'm the old curmudgeon that wonders, is there a different thing we should be or could be doing?
Well, I think that's an interesting point, Jeff, because like, what is the body that's directing people as to what we should be researching? Who's directing those security researchers today? Is it the bug crowds? Is it the major software companies that are defining these bug bounties? Is it outside of bug bounties? Is it an organization like CERT or OWASP or whoever that's saying we really need people focused on this problem.
I don't think there is any one group that's defining what they need research on.
Maybe in different verticals, they're.
Well,
certainly you have to separate it out.
If there was, I'd love to hear what people want me to research.
Well,
because
yeah.
I'd go down that route. But for if you think about everything that we've ever done for that type of stuff, it's like, hey,
genuine curiosity.
What the heck is that?
How do I?
Yeah.
I just bought this new thing and I'm relying on it for something that has some level of criticality in my life.
And I just got it, and I really should show that to Larry.
Yes, and let's go figure out what the vulnerabilities are, and that's typically how it happens today, Jeff. So
yeah, so a lot of direction. I'd say no.
I think there are specific industry verticals that either exist today or could be created to help steer things like medical devices. And so what should we be focusing on within medical devices? Sure, we could look at the firmware, and Billy Rios and many other researchers could tell us that it's a train wreck. We've established that. But what do we really need to research, and what information needs to come from that research to make the problem better in just that vertical? Up next, you're going to hear an interview from Dick Wilkins with talking about BIOS and platform firmware, more about platform firmware in UEFI. And they created a standards body to oversee the specification for UEFI, and he chairs the security committee that theoretically could drive where they want people to research various aspects of the standard UEFI, and then take it back to the council, which is made up of all, and Dick explains all how it's structured, and set the direction for research. He describes a very much open community that works together for that. So we should encourage, and what I got from the interview is we should encourage that in other verticals and industries. And I think if you overlay what Jeff is saying, that we should provide some focus. So today, there aren't thousands of researchers that are looking at consumer-based routers and just pointing out vulnerabilities. We get it.
Yeah. Speaking of, maybe we'll segue into one of the last stories. I think we talk about who's doing some of this research and what some of the direction is. Looking at the story that I posted about some of the attacks against some of the Saudi petrochemical stuff that happened last August, which was actually kind of frightening. It happened to be against some very specific types of hardware that's in about 18,000 different petrochemical plants. The Schneider Electric Triconex quote safety systems in some industrial control type systems that were intended to prevent various things from going wrong, as in they were the safety controls to shut things off when things went bad, and based on what you could get for 40 grand, you could buy some of these systems off of eBay to do some analysis on, to develop some vulnerabilities, to interact with these systems, to potentially in a petrochemical plant turn off all of the safety controls. So when something went wrong, you'd either never know about it or the safety controls wouldn't engage and bad things would happen. The intent and the discoveries based on this particular attack against these Triconex systems was that should there have not been a small bug in the attacker's code, these safety controls would have failed and there would have been explosions and bad things and people would have been killed. Terrifying.
Interesting.
And it's allegedly a small bug. And they know about it now. They know what the bug is. And they've likely fixed it.
Hopefully.
I thought I had another article about something along those lines. Maybe not. Any other articles that anyone want to cover? Also, Patrick, while we're potentially thinking about that, did we say that you work for Rapid7 today?
I do,
that's
yes.
Correct? I don't know if we disclosed that before. I feel bad now waiting till the end. Rapid7 is a sponsor.
And it is in the show notes.
Of the Security Weekly Network. It is in the show notes. So, and so you're doing pen testing for Rapid7 today? Is that your full-time day job today?
Yeah, that's what I do every day. I get to...
Living the dream.
Yeah, every single day.
It's gone to the dark side, and we're not just talking about Rapid7. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. No,
yeah, it's a whole lot of fun. Every single week, just kind of get a new target, and somebody says, here's this network, go at it, and at the end of the week, write a report and let us know what you found.
It's awesome.
It's fun stuff.
Nothing better.
Very cool. Well, with that, we'll take a short break and come back with our pre-recorded interview with Dick Wilkins from Phoenix Technologies. Do not miss this interview. It's awesome.